I never thought I'd come back here. The town I grew up in was the kind of place you left behind and never really talked about again. Small, quiet, and fading with every year that passed. People move away, buildings rot, and the silence feels heavier than it should. But sometimes, life pulls you back. For me, it was my uncle's funeral. He was the last of my family still living here. And when I got the call, I packed a bag, got in the car, and drove the 4 hours back to the town I swore I'd never set foot in again. Driving in, it looked just the same, though maybe a little more hollow. The gas station where we used to buy candy was boarded up. The diner still had its neon sign flickering, but the inside looked empty. The streets were quiet, too quiet, like the whole town was holding its breath. As I passed through Main Street, something caught my eye. It was a group of kids, maybe 12 or 13 years old, huddled together on their bikes. They weren't laughing or talking like kids usually do. They were staring at something across the street, pointing and whispering. I followed their gaze. And that's when I saw it again. The Hollow House. That's what we called it when I was their age. The big, sagging house on the edge of town. Its paint peeled away decades ago, windows dark, roof caving in. A house that didn't just look abandoned, it looked wrong. Every small town has a place like that. The house kids dare each other to knock on. The house people avoid when they walk their dogs. The house that feels like it's waiting for you. I hadn't thought about it in years, but just the sight of it, even from the car, made my stomach tighten. Memories came rushing back. Nights where we whispered about it. Dares we never went through with. Stories we passed around at school, each one scarier than the last. At the funeral, people spoke in hushed tones. The church pews were mostly empty. My uncle hadn't had many friends left here. I sat near the back, trying not to think about how alone I suddenly felt. Afterwards, at the small gathering, I overheard something that froze me. 2 older men were talking near the punch table. I wasn't trying to listen, but I caught just enough. "Happening again," one said. "Kids went missing up near the hollow," the other whispered. "Sheriff won't say it out loud, but we all know." I felt my chest tighten. "Missing?" I wanted to ask, but the way they lowered their voices told me I shouldn't. That night, I stayed at my uncle's old house, a place filled with dust and silence. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured that sagging house on the edge of town. I kept hearing those men's words in my head. "Happening again." At around 2 a.m., I heard something outside. Not a crash, not a shout, just a sound that was somehow worse. Whispering. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. It was faint, but I could swear I heard it. Low voices, carrying in the night air, like a group of people were standing just outside the house. I pulled back the curtain and looked out. The street was empty. The moonlight cast long shadows across the cracked pavement. No one was there. But I swear I saw movement near the tree line, just at the far end of the road. Something pale, something watching. I shut the curtain and told myself I was imagining things. It was just the town getting to me, the memories of childhood, the grief of the funeral. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling until morning came. The next day, I went to the diner for coffee. It was half empty, just a couple of regulars and the tired-looking waitress behind the counter. When she brought my coffee, she asked, "You're James's nephew, right? The one back for the funeral?" I nodded. Her eyes darted toward the window, toward the street. Then she leaned down, lowering her voice. "You stay away from that house, you hear?" I blinked. "What house?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The Hollow House. Everyone knew. When I left the diner, a man I hadn't seen in years stopped me outside. His name was Carter. He'd been a few years older than me in school. Rough-looking now, with lines in his face that made him seem twice his age. "You staying long?" he asked. "Just a couple of days," I told him. He nodded slowly. "Good. Don't get curious. Folks always get curious when they come back. You hear whispers, you hear stories, and you think it's just kids' talk, but it's not." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He leaned in, his voice low and serious. "I've been inside. That house, it knows you're there. And once it notices you, you don't shake it off, you carry it with you." I didn't know what to say. I half laughed, trying to brush it off, but Carter's eyes didn't change. He wasn't joking. That night, I thought about leaving town early, just packing my bag and driving away. But something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe stubbornness, kept me there. Because deep down, I knew Carter was right. I had already looked. I had already let the thought of that house back into my head, and it wasn't letting go. By the third night, the whispers outside my window were louder, more voices, clearer now, though I still couldn't make out the words. I pressed my ear to the glass, straining to hear. And then, clear as day, I heard my name. Not shouted, not spoken, just breathed, right outside my window. That was the night I realized I couldn't just ignore it. The house was calling, and I knew, sooner or later, I'd have to answer. I didn't tell anyone what I heard outside my window. Not Carter, not the waitress, not even myself, really. I pretended it hadn't happened. Pretended I was just tired, grieving, my mind playing tricks. But all day long, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had spoken to me. Not just outside my window, but directly to me. I tried to distract myself. Went through my uncle's house, sorted through some old boxes, even fixed a loose cabinet door in the kitchen. But every creak in the floorboards, every groan of the wind against the shutters made me jump. That night, when I finally crawled into bed, I told myself I'd sleep with the lamp on. That way, when I woke up in the middle of the night, and I knew I would, it wouldn't feel as dark. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I remember is the sound of scratching. At first, I thought it was in the walls, maybe mice or a raccoon outside. But then I realized it was too steady, too deliberate. Long, slow scratches, like fingernails dragging down wood. I froze. My body wanted to move, but my muscles locked up. I lay there, listening. The sound moved from one side of the house to the other. Then it stopped. I sat up, holding my breath, staring at the door. The lamp threw soft light across the room, but the hallway beyond was pitch black. That's when I heard it again, the whispering. Louder this time, more voices, layered together like a crowd muttering in church. I forced myself to stand. I don't know why. Maybe to prove I wasn't afraid. Maybe because I knew if I stayed in that bed, I'd lose my mind. I opened the door. The hallway stretched out in front of me, dark and still. The whispers seemed to pour from the walls, from the ceiling, from everywhere at once. I whispered back, "Hello?" Silence. Then 3 sharp knocks. They came from downstairs at the front door. Not pounding, Not violent, just 3 solid knocks, as if someone was politely asking to come inside. I gripped the railing and leaned over, trying to see the door below. Moonlight spilled through the glass window above it, but no one stood there. My mouth went dry. My chest hurt from holding my breath. And then I saw movement. Not at the door. In the corner, near the coat rack. A figure, pale and thin, standing perfectly still. I blinked, and it was gone. I slammed my bedroom door shut and locked it. That night, I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, I stumbled into town, exhausted. The waitress at the diner took one look at me and said, "Rough night?" I just nodded. This time, she didn't lean in to whisper warnings. She just poured me coffee and left me alone. But someone else slid into the booth across from me. It was a man I didn't recognize. Mid-40s, weathered face, dark eyes that didn't seem to blink enough. He wore a heavy coat, even though it was warm out. "You've seen it, haven't you?" he asked. No introduction, no small talk. I frowned. "Seen what?" He tilted his head slightly, studying me. "The hollow. It doesn't wait long once it knows you're back." A chill ran down my spine. "Who are you?" "Name's Ellis. Been watching that house for years. Folks think I'm crazy, but I know what's in there. It doesn't stay put. It follows. It likes to test you before it really shows itself." I tried to laugh it off. "You sound like Carter." Ellis, his eyes narrowed. "Carter told you about it? Then you should listen. He went in once. Came out wrong. He doesn't talk about what really happened, but I know. He saw things. He carried them out with him. They never let go." My stomach turned. "What do you mean, never let go?" Ellis leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You ever hear whispers when you're alone? Ever feel like someone's standing just outside your door? That's it. That's how it starts." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. He saw it in my face. "Don't go back there. You think you can ignore it, but the more you fight it, the louder it gets. And once you step inside," he shook his head, "you don't leave the same." Then he stood and walked out, leaving me with my coffee and a heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. That night, I told myself I'd do something different. I wouldn't just lie in bed waiting for the whispers. I'd confront them. So when the scratching came again, around midnight, I forced myself to get up. I grabbed the flashlight from the drawer and crept down the stairs. Each step groaned beneath my feet. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me. When I reached the front door, I paused. My hand hovered over the knob. My breath clouded in the cold air, though the heater had been running all evening. And then, 3 knocks, same as the night before. This time, right on the other side of the door. My hand shook as I reached for the knob. I wanted to see. I needed to see. I swung the door open. No one. The porch was empty. The street, silent. But something caught my eye. On the wooden boards just outside the door, there were scratches. Fresh ones, carved deep into the wood. Long, jagged marks, as if someone had dragged their nails across the porch. And at the very bottom, scratched deeper than the rest, was a word. My name. I didn't sleep that night either. I sat in the living room with every light on, gripping the flashlight, waiting for the sun. By morning, I had made a decision. I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't brush this off as grief or imagination. If the Hollow House wanted me, then I'd have to face it. And deep down, I think part of me already wanted to. Because once it calls you, curiosity doesn't feel like a choice anymore. I couldn't stop staring at the scratches on the porch. Even in the daylight, they looked fresh. Raw wood splintered up where someone had dug deep. My name etched into the grain like it had been carved by teeth. I thought about sanding it down, covering it with paint, anything to erase it, but I couldn't bring myself to touch it. It felt like if I did, I'd be admitting it was real. So instead, I left it. Later that afternoon, I ran into Carter outside the grocery store. He looked the same as always, worn down, jittery like he hadn't slept properly in years. When he saw me, his eyes narrowed. "You've heard it, haven't you?" I hesitated, then nodded. He spat on the ground, shaking his head. "Should have left town after the funeral. Shouldn't have never looked at that damn place." I swallowed hard. "Then why'd you go in? Why not just stay away?" For a moment, his face softened, like he was remembering something he didn't want to. "Because once it calls you, staying away feels worse than going in." Those words stuck with me all day. By nightfall, I had made up my mind. I was done waiting for whispers outside my window, scratches on my porch. If the house wanted me, then I'd go to it. But I wasn't going alone. I called up two people I hadn't seen in years, Ben and Mara. We'd grown up together, inseparable back in high school. They knew the stories, same as I did. We all had memories of daring each other to ride our bikes past the hollow house, of chickening out before we ever set foot inside. When I told them I was back in town, they agreed to meet me at the bar that night. It was the kind of place where nothing much ever happened. Same faded pool table, same smell of old smoke and spilled beer. When I finally worked up the nerve to bring up the hollow house, Ben laughed. "Man, we're too old for ghost stories," he said, shaking his head. But Mara didn't laugh. She leaned in closer, her voice low. "My cousin swears she saw something there. Last year. Said she and some friends went up there one night just messing around. They thought it was empty, but she swears someone was in the upstairs window watching them. They left, but she hasn't been right since. Keeps saying she hears her name when she's alone." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I told them about the scratches on my porch, about hearing my name outside my window, about the knocks at the door. Ben went pale. "You're serious?" I nodded. For a long time, none of us spoke, then finally sighed and said, "If we're doing this, we do it right. All three of us, just like old times." Mara shook her head. "This isn't a game, Ben. People don't come back the same." But Ben just smiled nervously, the way he always did when he was scared, but didn't want to admit it. "That's what makes it a dare, isn't it?" We met the next night, just after midnight. The three of us stood at the edge of the overgrown lot, staring at the hollow house. It looked worse up close. The siding hung loose in jagged strips. Windows gaped like black eyes. The front porch sagged under its own weight. And yet, it felt alive, like the whole structure was breathing, waiting. "God, I can't believe we're doing this," Mara whispered, hugging her jacket tighter. "Better now than waiting for it to come to us," I muttered. We crept up the steps, careful not to break through the rotten boards. My flashlight beam quivered across the door, which hung slightly open. Ben nudged it wider, the hinges screaming in protest. The smell hit us first. Rot, mildew, and something else. something sweet and sour that made my stomach turn. Inside, the air was heavy. The floor groaned with every step, dust rising in the beams of our flashlights. Wallpaper peeled in long strips, curling like dead skin. "Jesus," Mara muttered, covering her nose. We moved room by room. The living room was empty except for a broken chair in the corner. The kitchen counters were covered in layers of grime, as if no one had touched them in decades. But what unsettled me most was the silence. Even in an abandoned place, you expect to hear something. Wind through cracks, animals scurrying, boards creaking. But here there was nothing. The silence was thick, suffocating. And then we heard it. A voice, soft, distant, coming from upstairs. We froze. My heart hammered in my chest. Mara grabbed my arm, whispering, "Tell me you heard that." Ben swallowed hard. "Probably just the wind." But we all knew it wasn't. We climbed the staircase slowly, every step groaning beneath our weight. At the top, the hallway stretched long and dark. Doors lined either side, each one slightly ajar. The voice came again, closer this time, a whisper, almost like someone calling out. And this time, it was my name. I tightened my grip on the flashlight, my mouth dry. "We shouldn't be here," Mara hissed. But I kept moving forward. The whisper had pulled me in like a hook in my chest. We stopped at the last door. My hand shook as I pushed it open. The room inside was empty. Bare floorboards, walls stained with water damage, ceiling caving in. But in the middle of the floor, there was something strange. A small pile of cassette tapes. Dusty, cracked, but stacked neatly, as if someone had placed them there on purpose. Ben crouched down, picking one up. The label had faded, but there were still words scrawled in shaky handwriting. Tape 1. The room was silent. Too silent. And then, just as Ben turned the tape over, every door in the hallway slammed shut at once. The sound thundered through the house, shaking the walls. Mara screamed, dropping her flashlight. We bolted, racing down the stairs, nearly tripping over each other. The front door seemed a mile away, but somehow we made it, bursting out into the cold night air. We didn't stop running until we were back at my uncle's house. Only then did we realize Ben still had one of the tapes clutched in his hand. We sat at the kitchen table, gasping for breath. The tape lay between us like some cursed object. None of us wanted to touch it. Finally, Ben broke the silence. "We have to listen to it." Mara shook her head violently. "Are you insane after what just happened?" But I found myself staring at it, unable to look away. Deep down, I knew whatever was on that tape wasn't just random. It was meant for us to find. And I knew, one way or another, we were going to hear what was on it. We sat there in my uncle's kitchen, the three of us, staring at that tape like it was alive. No one said a word for a long time. It just sat there on the table between us. Cracked plastic, faded label, tape 1. Finally, Ben pushed his chair back and stood. "I'm not waiting around. We found it for a reason. We need to know what's on it." Mara grabbed his wrist. "No! You saw what happened. The doors, the whispers. God, James, tell him!" I didn't know what to say. My throat felt dry. She was right. But something in me couldn't turn away. Like the tape was calling the same way the house had. Ben was already rummaging through the cupboards. "Your uncle have an old cassette player? Everybody around here used to." I remembered one, out in the garage, under a pile of tools. The kind of bulky, boxy tape player you'd find in classrooms back in the 80s. We set it on the table, dusted it off, and slid the tape inside. For a second, nothing. Then a hiss of static, a low hum, and then a voice. Not ours, not anyone we knew. The voice was male, shaky, like someone recording late at night. Okay, this is day one. The sounds started 3 nights ago. Whispers outside the window, knocks at the door. I know it's that house. I know it. I felt the hair rise on my arms. The man's voice cracked as he spoke. Everyone says to stay away, but I can't. It's in my head. I hear it even when I'm awake. I think it wants me to come inside. Mara shifted in her seat, arms crossed tight against her chest. "Turn it off," she whispered. But Ben didn't. He leaned closer, eyes locked on the player. The tape hissed. The voice continued. "Went in today, only for a minute. Felt like someone was following me the whole time. The rooms are empty, but they're not. It's like the house breathes. I saw..." A sudden screech of feedback cut through the speaker, making us all flinch. Then silence. I reached for the stop button, but just before I touched it, the tape clicked, and the voice returned. Only this time it was different. Lower, slower, and it wasn't the man anymore. It was something else. It whispered the man's name, drew it out like it was tasting it. Then it began to laugh. Not loud, not human, but this horrible, rattling chuckle that crawled under your skin. Mara shoved her chair back, her face pale. She hit stop and yanked the tape out, slamming it down on the counter. For a long time, none of us spoke. The only sound was the faint whir of the fridge. Finally, Ben broke the silence. "There are more. We saw them. A whole stack." Mara glared at him. "You think we should go back after what just happened?" His jaw clenched. "Don't you get it? Whoever made these was documenting it. They were keeping track. Maybe they knew what it was. Maybe they figured out how to stop it." Her voice cracked. "Or maybe it killed them." The word hung heavy in the air. Killed. I picked up the tape, turning it over in my hand. The plastic felt cold. Wrong. "Maybe both," I muttered. The next day, we tried to act normal. Met up in town, grabbed lunch, talked about anything except the house. But none of us were really there. We kept glancing at each other, knowing we were all thinking the same thing. By evening, Ben texted me, "We need the rest of those tapes." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "Midnight." The second time we went back, it felt different. The first time had been fear and adrenaline. This time, it was dread, like we were walking into something we already knew was waiting. The house loomed against the night sky, windows black and hollow. The air around it felt colder than the rest of the town. We crept up the porch steps. The door was still ajar, just like before, as if the house had been expecting us. Inside, the air was thick with dust. Our flashlights cut through the darkness, casting long shadows on the walls. We went straight upstairs, to the last room. The pile of tapes was still there, undisturbed. Only now, it looked bigger. "I swear there weren't this many last time," Mara whispered. Ben crouched down, running his fingers over the spines. Numbers scrawled in ink. Tape 1, tape 2, tape 3, up into the teens. He grabbed 2 more and stuffed them in his bag. That's enough for now. But as we turned to leave, something happened. The whispering started. Not faint, not distant. This time it was all around us. Layered voices, overlapping, too many to count. They weren't words we could understand, just this low, endless murmur, like 100 people speaking at once. My flashlight flickered. Mara gasped.
And then, footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, on the stairs. We froze. My chest tightened. My pulse thundered in my ears. The footsteps grew louder, closer, slow and steady, like someone was taking their time. Ben grabbed my arm. "We have to move!" But when we turned toward the hall, every door swung open at once, slamming against the walls, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Mara screamed. The whispering turned into laughter, deep, guttural, human. We bolted down the stairs, out the door, sprinting through the yard like hunted animals. The laughter followed us, growing louder, until we finally made it to the street. Only then did it stop. We didn't look back. At my uncle's house, we played the second tape. The same man's voice. Day 6. I can't eat. I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, it's there. I hear it in the walls. Sometimes I see shadows move, even when the lights are on. I know I should leave, but I can't. It won't let me. He sounded weaker than before. Broken. If anyone finds these, please don't go inside. Don't. The tape cut off again, replaced with static. Then the low chuckling returned, louder this time. And beneath it, I swear I heard something else. A second voice. Not laughing, not whispering, screaming. We sat in silence long after the tape stopped. None of us wanted to admit what we had just heard. Finally, Mara stood. Her hands shook as she grabbed her jacket. "I'm done. I'm not listening to another second of this." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Ben sat back, rubbing his face. "She'll come back. She has to." I didn't answer. I was still staring at the tape player. Because even though it was empty, even though nothing was playing, I swore I could still hear that low, rattling laugh. And somewhere underneath, a voice calling my name.
Mara didn't come back the next day, or the day after. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Ben said she was just cooling off, but I wasn't so sure. I'd seen the look in her eyes when she walked out. That wasn't just fear. That was someone who decided she wanted nothing more to do with us, or the house, or the tapes. Still, the silence ate at me. I spent the day wandering town, trying not to think about it. By evening, I ended up back at the diner. Same booth, same coffee, same tired waitress. And that's when Ellis slid into the seat across from me again. He didn't even say hello, just stared at me with those hollow eyes. "You went in, didn't you?" I froze. My mouth went dry. "What makes you say that?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Because you look different. People always do after they step foot in that place. It marks you." I tried to laugh, but it came out thin. "You sound like Carter." Carter saw something in there. That's why he drinks so much, why he can't sleep. Ellis's eyes didn't leave mine. "What did you see?" I thought about the whispering, the laughter, the doors slamming shut. But more than that, I thought about the tapes, about the man's voice breaking apart piece by piece, until it wasn't even him anymore. "I don't know," I muttered. "But it's not just stories, is it?" Ellis shook his head slowly. "No, it's not." For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked the question that had been gnawing at me since childhood. "What is that house?" Ellis sat back, running a hand through his graying hair. "Depends who you ask. Some say it's a cursed ground. Others say it's the family that lived there. The Hollow family." I frowned. That's just a name kids made up." He shook his head again. "No, it was real. Elias Hollow built that house back in the 1800s, moved his family out here after the war. No one knew much about him. He didn't mix with town folk, didn't show up in church, but everyone said there was something off about him. His eyes, the way he stared, like he was watching things no one else could see." A chill ran down my spine. "What happened to them?" I asked. Ellis's voice dropped. "They vanished. One night, just gone. Neighbors said they heard screaming, but when the sheriff came the next morning, the house was empty. No bodies, no signs of struggle. Just the furniture left where it was, and the doors standing open." "Vanished?" I whispered. He nodded. "And after that, things started happening. Folks who went up there would hear voices, see people that weren't there. A few even went missing. Sheriff always called them runaways, accidents. But the town knew better." My stomach twisted. The house hadn't just been abandoned, it had been empty since the Hollow family disappeared. "Why hasn't anyone torn it down?" I asked. Ellis's lips curled in a humorless smile. "Oh, they tried. Back in the 60s, the town voted to demolish it. First crew that went out there quit before they even started. Said their equipment broke down, tools went missing, one guy cut his hand bad. They sent a second crew, but the night before, half the men woke up with scratches all over their doors. They all walked off the job. And no one's tried since?" "Would you?" I didn't answer. When I got back to the house, Ben was waiting on the porch. His face lit up when he saw me. "Man, where have you been? I've been blowing up your phone." "Talking to Ellis," I muttered. Ben rolled his eyes. "That weirdo? He'll tell you whatever you want to hear. You really believe his ghost stories?" I didn't reply. I just unlocked the door and let us in. On the kitchen table sat the 2 tapes we hadn't finished. Ben's eyes landed on them immediately. "Let's play the next one," he said. I hesitated. "Maybe we should wait for Mara." "She's not coming back," he muttered. His voice cracked on the words like he didn't believe them himself. He slid the tape in before I could argue. Static. Then the man's voice. "Day 9. I don't know what's real anymore. I swear I hear my name every night. Sometimes I see them standing at the foot of my bed. They don't move. They just watch. Faces pale, eyes black. His voice broke into sobs, the sound of someone completely unraveling. Then silence. For a moment, I thought the tape had ended, but then, faintly, another voice bled through. Not his. A woman's voice. Low, cracked, whispering. "You'll never leave." The tape clicked off. Ben leaned back, rubbing his face. Jesus Christ. We sat there in silence, both of us shaken. That's when my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "Stop listening." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. "Ben, did you give anyone my number?" He shook his head. The phone buzzed again. Another message. "It knows you." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept the lights on, pacing the living room, checking the windows every few minutes. Every creak in the house made me flinch. At 3 a.m., there was a knock at the door. 3 knocks. Just like before. I froze, staring at the door, my whole body locked up. Then, my phone buzzed again. "Don't open it." In the morning, Ben showed up again, jittery and pale. "You won't believe this. I woke up last night and found scratches on my bedroom wall. Same as your porch, but this time it spelled out a word." My stomach dropped. "What word?" He swallowed hard. "Tomorrow." Ben's wall said, "Tomorrow." That one word was enough to keep us both awake, pacing the living room like trapped animals. The clock ticked louder than usual. Every creak of the floorboards felt like footsteps, and even the sound of the fridge humming made me jump. Neither of us said it out loud, but we both knew we weren't safe. Not anymore. By morning, my nerves were fried. Coffee didn't help. Music didn't help. Sitting in the house, waiting for whatever tomorrow meant, was worse than anything the hollow house itself could throw at me. So I told Ben, we need to see where this started. Not just the house, the woods. He blinked at me, exhausted. You're kidding. I'm serious. Ellis said the family vanished. People don't just vanish. Something out there, maybe they left a trace. Ben stared at me like I'd lost it, then groaned and rubbed his face. Man, you're gonna get us killed. But after a long pause, he grabbed his jacket anyway. That afternoon, we stood at the tree line behind the hollow house. The woods looked darker than I remembered. Not just shaded, dark. Like the trees themselves were blocking out more light than they should, their branches tangled together like a cage. Place looks like it hasn't seen the sun in 100 years, Ben muttered. I didn't disagree. The air was different too, thicker, cooler. And the deeper we stepped in, the quieter it got. No crickets, no rustling leaves, no distant hum of town life. Just silence. We followed what looked like a deer trail, narrow and half-eaten by weeds. With every step, the light seemed to dim, like we were walking further from the world and deeper into something else entirely. Ben broke the silence first. You ever notice how nobody in town even talks about this place? Not just the house, the woods. It's like they pretend it doesn't exist. Maybe that's the point, I said. Like if they don't acknowledge it, it won't reach them. Ben snorted, but there was no humor in it. After half an hour, we found the first marking. It was on the trunk of a dead oak, black and scarred. Strange circular symbols had been carved into the bark, burned deep like someone pressed hot iron into it. What the hell? Ben crouched, tracing the grooves with his fingertips. His hand shook. This isn't new. Look how the bark's grown around it. But it's not random either. This is deliberate. I scanned the trees and saw more. The further we walked, the more appeared. Etchings on every trunk, forming a kind of circle. Dozens of them, stretching wider and wider like a boundary. And at the center of that circle was a pit, 6 feet across, black stones around the edge. The earth inside was scorched, cracked, like fire had eaten it down to bone. But it wasn't just dirt. Scattered across the ash were bones. Some small like rabbits, some larger, too large. Ben swore under his breath, stumbling back. That's not just animals, that's... Jesus, man, I think that's a hand! I forced myself to look closer. The bones were brittle, yellowed, scattered like someone had tossed them instead of burying them. My stomach turned, and then I saw it. Half buried at the pit's edge, sticking out of the dirt, a carved figure. I pulled it free, brushing off ash. It was a crude little doll, no bigger than my hand. A person, thin and twisted, mouth stretched wide open in a scream. As soon as I touched it, the woods went silent. I don't mean quiet, I mean silent. Not even the sound of our own breathing seemed to exist. And then whispers, soft at first, from the trees, from the ground, from right behind us. Ben's flashlight jerked side to side. Who's there? The voices grew louder, layered, dozens of them, male, female, children, all speaking at once.
But it wasn't just nonsense this time. It was words. Go back. Not yours. Tomorrow. The way they spoke that last word made my blood turn cold. Like a promise, not a threat. Run, Ben hissed. He didn't need to say it twice. We tore through the trees, branches whipping our faces, roots clawing at our ankles. The whispers followed, circling, chasing, laughing. When we finally stumbled out of the woods and into the clearing, gasping for air, the hollow house stood waiting for us. And we weren't alone. On the porch, standing perfectly still, was Mara. We froze. She looked like she hadn't moved since the night she left. Same clothes, same hair, but her skin was pale, almost gray, and her eyes, God, her eyes weren't right. They were too dark, too empty, like the reflection was gone. Mara? I called, my voice cracking. She didn't answer. She just tilted her head to the side like she was studying us. Ben stepped forward, shaky. Hey, it's us! You okay? Her lips parted, but the voice that came out wasn't hers. You shouldn't have gone into the woods. It wasn't just one voice. It was two, layered. Hers and something else, something deeper, like rocks grinding together. Ben staggered back. Oh, Jesus! Mara twitched, suddenly. Her body jerked like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. Once, twice, then she collapsed onto her knees. We rushed forward, but before we could reach her, the front door slammed shut behind her. The sound rattled the whole porch. When we looked down again, she was gone. Just gone. That night at my uncle's, we sat in silence, blinds drawn, every light in the house burning. Ben was shaking so hard his teeth chattered. She was there. We both saw her. That was Mara. That had to be Mara. I shook my head, though my stomach was in knots. That wasn't her. Not anymore. Ben buried his face in his hands. Then what the hell was it? Neither of us spoke for a long time. The ticking clock was the only sound. Finally, Ben lifted his head, his eyes wide. James, what if tomorrow isn't a warning? What if it's when it happens? I didn't answer, because deep down, I was starting to believe him. That night, the whispers didn't stay outside. They were in the house. They moved through the walls, the floors, the vents, surrounding us from every corner. And they weren't whispering anymore. They were chanting. Over and over the same word, their voices growing louder until the air itself seemed to shake. Hollow, hollow, hollow. After that night, we didn't speak much. Words felt useless. Even breathing felt heavy, as if the house had followed us back into my uncle's home. The whispers, the chanting, Mara. It was all too much. But it wasn't gone, not by a long shot. By the third night, something had changed in Ben. It started small. He stopped sleeping. He would wake in the middle of the night, staring at the ceiling, whispering things under his breath, words I couldn't understand, words that made my stomach twist. At first I thought it was fear, maybe guilt, the kind that eats at you when you've seen something you can't explain. But it was more than that. He started moving differently too, a stiffness in his back, jerky motions, like his body was responding to someone else. And every time he passed the window, I could swear I saw his eyes flicker, pale, almost reflective. I'm fine, he kept saying, but the words didn't match the way he sounded, the way he looked. I knew then that the hollow house hadn't let him go. One evening, we returned to the edge of town, not to the house itself, but to the small clearing where the woods began. I needed answers, and so did Ben, whether he realized it or not. We were silent, walking through the trees, the ground littered with leaves and broken branches. The air smelled of damp soil and decay, and even in daylight the shadows seemed too dark, twisting against the light. "I can feel it following me," Ben said, finally, his voice low. "Even when we're not at the house." I nodded. "It's like it's in you now, like it's part of you." He turned sharply toward me. "James, you don't understand. I hear it. It talks to me. Not like voices in the night, like it's inside me, and it wants something." Something clicked in my chest. That was the word I'd been trying to avoid. Possession. I had read about it, seen it in movies, heard stories in the news, but I never thought I'd experience it. Not with someone I cared about. And now it was happening. By nightfall, it was worse. Ben's eyes had changed completely. No longer pale flickers. Now the whites of his eyes were nearly gone, replaced with a dark gray haze. His pupils seemed dilated, like tunnels leading nowhere. And when he moved, it wasn't natural. Every step was deliberate, stiff, but too fast, like he was being controlled by something else. I tried to talk to him. "Ben, look at me. Fight it." He laughed, but it wasn't him. It was something low, guttural, a voice inside his throat that wasn't his own. "You came back. You can't leave." I stumbled backward, heart racing. What do you want?" The shadow in his eyes seemed to smile. "Hollow. All must be hollow." I froze. That word again. The same chant from the woods, from the house. And now it had invaded him.
I didn't know what to do. I couldn't just hit him, couldn't just run. He was my friend, my only friend here. And something had him trapped. Something older, something patient, something hungry. I remembered the carvings in the woods, the circle, the pit, the burned earth, and the doll. Maybe there was a pattern, a key, something to undo this. I grabbed my jacket and pulled him toward the car. "We're going back," I said, "to the clearing. Maybe if we find the center, we can—" He shook violently, almost like he was resisting me, but it wasn't strong enough. A low hiss escaped him, and I saw the darkness in his eyes flare. "You can't take me there." And suddenly, he lunged. Not at me, at the house. He ran like a machine, straight toward the hollow house on the edge of town. I chased him, screaming his name. "Ben, stop! Fight it!" By the time we reached the porch, he was gone. The front door creaked open as if inviting him inside, and then, before I could move, the door slammed shut behind him. I was left standing in the moonlight, alone. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The house was alive. I could hear him inside, or something speaking through him. Footsteps pacing, doors creaking, whispering, chanting. The word hollow, repeating in every shadow, every corner, every breath. By morning, I knew I had to go back in. I had no choice. I walked up the steps, hands shaking, and pressed my ear to the front door. The whispers stopped instantly. Silence. Then a single voice. Ben's voice, but wrong, stretched and hollow. "James, join us." I backed away, but I couldn't leave him. I found a side window and climbed in. The house smelled of dust and rot, old wood and something else I couldn't place, something acrid, metallic. The interior was empty, the living room dark and warped, as if the house itself had stretched while we were outside. Shadows clung to the corners, thick, almost tangible. Then I heard him moving upstairs. I followed, each step heavy, each breath shaky. And I saw him. Ben stood at the top of the staircase, his head tilted, eyes dark as midnight. Around him, the air shimmered, like the house was breathing. "You shouldn't be here," he said, but his mouth moved in ways that didn't match the voice. Another whisper, another layer behind his words spoke at the same time. "Come, or stay. Doesn't matter." I gritted my teeth. "I'm not leaving you." The thing inside him laughed, a sound that made the floor shake. "Then join us." I knew then that this wasn't just a house, not just a spirit. It was old, older than the town, older than the people who'd vanished. It fed on them, twisted them, made them its own. And Ben, my friend, was next. I had to fight it alone, and the moment I realized that, the shadows moved. They reached for me.
I didn't know how long I'd been in the house. Minutes, hours, days. Time seemed meaningless here. The shadows moved around me, twisting and crawling like smoke, whispering and laughing, sometimes mimicking Ben's voice. Every corner seemed alive, every creak of the floorboard a warning. I stumbled down a hallway I didn't recognize. The wallpaper was peeling in jagged strips, the paint bubbling like skin. The air smelled damp, like mold mixed with old wood, and something else, something acrid and metallic. My heart pounded in my chest, loud enough I could hear it in my ears, as if the house was counting it. And then I saw it. A door at the end of the hallway. Old, blackened wood, carved with symbols that matched the ones in the woods. My hand trembled as I reached for the knob. I didn't want to open it. I didn't want to know what was behind it. But I knew I had no choice. Ben was inside. I had to find him. I pushed the door slowly. It creaked open, revealing a room that seemed wrong. The air was heavy, thick, making it hard to breathe. It smelled of iron and damp earth, like a grave freshly dug. Candles burned along the walls, but their flames didn't flicker. They glowed steadily, casting shadows that didn't match the objects in the room. The walls seemed to stretch and bend in ways that made my stomach lurch. In the center, a circle. Not drawn on the floor, not painted, etched deep into the wood itself, black and bleeding, as if the house had carved it with its own fingernails. Symbols, runes, shapes I couldn't recognize. The circle was large enough to hold a person, and at its center stood Ben, or what was left of him. His body swayed unnaturally, limbs jerking, head lolling back, whispering the word I'd been dreading. Hollow. I tried to call his name, but my voice felt stuck in my throat. The air was thick with something oppressive, almost alive, that pushed against me, trying to stop me from moving forward. And then I saw them. Figures, standing just outside the circle, pale, almost translucent, watching. They didn't move. They didn't breathe. They just waited. They weren't alive, not in any sense I understood, but they weren't dead either. They were caught in the same space as the house, the same force that had claimed Ben. One of the figures turned slowly toward me. Its face was familiar. A child, small, hair matted, eyes hollow. And then I knew. These were the vanished, people who had disappeared in the town over the years. They had been claimed by the Hollow House, drawn into its ritual, and now they waited, trapped.
I stepped forward cautiously. Each footstep felt like wading through thick water. My heart hammered in my ears. I needed to understand what was happening if I was going to save Ben. The symbols on the floor pulsed faintly, almost like a heartbeat. I realized the circle wasn't just a symbol of containment, it was a trap, a conduit. The house used it to reach into people, bend them to its will, claim them entirely. Ben's voice grew louder, merging with the whispers from the shadows. "Join us! Join us! Join us!" I wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, but I couldn't leave him. Not like this. I remembered the doll from the woods, the one that I had touched before the shadows had surrounded us. Maybe it was a key. Maybe it could break the connection. I reached into my bag and pulled it out, its twisted, screaming face reflected in the candlelight. My hands shook as I stepped into the circle. Immediately, the air pressed down on me. The shadows lashed out, wrapping around my legs, my arms, trying to push me back. The whispers rose to a roar, hissing and chanting, filling my head with static and madness. I gritted my teeth and moved forward, each step deliberate, toward Ben. "Ben, it's me! You have to fight it!" I shouted, voice cracking. The figure at the center shivered. The darkness in his eyes flickered, just for a moment, but it was enough. I held up the doll and pressed it on the floor in front of him. The symbols flared black against the wood. Then a burst of light shot upward, making the shadows recoil. They screamed, or something screamed, and I felt a pulse of pain in my chest, like the house itself was hitting me. Ben stumbled backward, convulsing, then went limp. I caught him just in time. His eyes blinked, clearing, pale but human again. "James." His voice was weak, hoarse, but it was him. I nodded, tears in my eyes. "It's okay. You're okay." The shadows shrank, fading into the corners. The figures outside the circle vanished like smoke. Silence fell. For a brief moment, I thought it was over, but the house didn't let up. Walls groaned, floorboards creaked and cracked. A low hum filled the room, vibrating through my chest. The symbols on the floor glowed faintly. I could feel the house thinking, aware, angry. It had lost its hold over Ben, for now, but it wasn't finished. I grabbed Ben and pulled him toward the door. Each step was a struggle. Shadows brushed against us, cold and sharp. The hallway stretched longer than it should have. I wanted to scream, but my throat was dry. We stumbled into the living room. I sank to the floor, trying to catch my breath. Ben sat beside me, shivering. "It's still here. It wants more." I nodded. "I know. But we survived. We can fight it. We have to." That night, we left the Hollow House. Not the town, just the cursed building. We drove in silence through empty streets, the moonlight casting long shadows over the pavement. Neither of us slept. The memories of the circle, the chanting, the vanished, burned in my mind. The Hollow House had chosen its victims carefully, over decades, maybe centuries. It waited, patient. It would call again. And when it did, I knew it wouldn't let anyone leave so easily. We thought leaving the Hollow House would be enough, that once Ben was free, once we escaped that cursed place, the nightmare would end. But the Hollow House doesn't just stay in one place. It follows, it waits, it finds you. The first night after we left, the darkness seemed heavier, thicker, as if the shadows themselves had climbed into our room. I woke to a cold breeze that smelled like rot, even though all the windows were closed. Ben was awake too, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. "I can feel it," he whispered. "It's still in the house, and now it's here." I tried to tell myself he was imagining it, that after what we'd been through, we were both on edge. But then I heard it, a faint scraping sound at the edge of the room, like nails against wood. Slow, deliberate, patient. We stayed in our apartment that night, lights on, doors locked, but the sensation didn't leave. Something was moving just outside the edges of our vision. Shadows that shouldn't exist. Shapes that flickered in the corners. The temperature dropped so sharply I could see my breath. Over the next few days, things escalated. Doors slammed on their own. Objects moved when we weren't looking. My phone would ring, but when I answered, there was only static, with faint whispers threading through. Sometimes it would imitate voices I knew. Friends, neighbors, but they would say things we hadn't heard in months. Things only the hollow house could know. One night we heard pounding on our front door. Ben froze, his eyes wide. "It's here," he said, his voice shaking. "It knows where we are." I wanted to run, leave the city, anywhere, but even the thought of leaving didn't feel right. The hollow house didn't just claim its victims inside its walls. It carried its terror with them, like a parasite. Then came the disappearance. Mara, our friend from the woods, who had always been cautious but brave, had been helping us research. She had insisted she could find answers in the town archives, but one evening she didn't return from the library. We waited. Hours passed. Nothing. Then her phone rang, but when I answered, I could barely make out her voice. "It's coming. Don't..." Then the line went dead. We searched, calling her name, retracing every step she could have taken. The library was empty, the streets were silent, and then at the edge of the park near the woods, we found her bag, abandoned, zipped halfway open, the contents spilled across the ground. Her notebook, the recorder she had carried, some papers with frantic scribbles. No sign of her. The hollow house had crossed the line. It was no longer confined. I remember standing there, clutching Mara's notebook, heart hammering. The words inside were nearly illegible, but fragments made my blood run cold. It watches, waits. It wants us. The circle is not enough. It follows. It grows stronger. Do not leave the house. Do not sleep. Ben put a hand on my shoulder. "We have to go back," he said, his voice shaking. "We can't fight it out there. The only way to stop it, maybe, we have to go back to the house itself." I wanted to argue, to tell him we barely survived the first time, that going back meant almost certain death, but Mara was gone, and the hollow house had marked her, and now us. We had no choice. The drive back was tense, silent except for the hum of the engine and the occasional creak of the old van. Shadows seemed to move with us, stretching along the road under the dim streetlights. I kept checking the rearview mirror, expecting to see something that shouldn't exist. When we reached the outskirts of town, the familiar silhouette of the hollow house rose against the night sky. Windows dark, doors sealed, yet somehow alive. I felt it before I even got out of the van. A cold press against my chest, a voice in my mind whispering, "Welcome back." Ben grabbed my arm. "Stay close," he said. His hands were shaking. Mine were too. Inside, the house felt different, angrier, harsher. The walls were closer together, the air thicker, almost suffocating. The shadows were everywhere, coiling along the edges of the rooms like snakes, whispering secrets, chanting, calling our names. We retraced our steps to the ritual room, hearts pounding, every step echoing like a drumbeat in a grave. The symbols on the floor glowed faintly, pulsing with a rhythm like a heartbeat. And then we saw her, Mara. She was inside the circle, pale, eyes wide, unmoving, swaying as if controlled by strings only the house could see. The shadows clung to her like smoke. Her voice, or something using her voice, hissed, "Join, join, join." I froze. My stomach turned. Ben stepped forward. "Mara, fight it!" Her head whipped toward us, eyes black and hollow for a moment, then filled with terror as if she recognized us. She screamed, not a normal scream, but something jagged, broken, full of pain. The shadows lunged. I barely thought. I grabbed the doll, the same one that had freed Ben, and stepped into the circle. The air hit me like a physical force, pushing, twisting. The shadows shrieked, flailing against me, trying to stop me from reaching Mara. Ben joined me, gripping her arm. "We can't let it take her," he shouted. I pressed the doll against the floor, directly in front of Mara. Light burst from the symbols, and the shadows shrieked in pain. Mara collapsed against us, trembling but alive. The house seemed to shudder, walls groaning, floorboards cracking as if it was screaming too. For a moment we thought it was over, but the hollow house isn't finished. We ran, carrying Mara with us, bursting through the twisting hallways. The shadows tried to claw at us, but the circle's energy seemed to repel them, if only briefly. Doors slammed behind us, windows shattered, and I could feel the house stretching, reaching, hungry for more. We made it to the van and sped away. Silence fell outside the town, but inside me, inside all of us, the terror remained. The hollow house had been temporarily beaten back, but we knew one day it would call again, and next time it might not be so forgiving.
We knew what we had to do. The hollow house had claimed too much already. Mara, countless others, and nearly us. Every night since we first entered, the shadows had whispered, laughed, and taunted, and we could feel them growing stronger. They weren't just inside the house anymore. They were inside us, threading into our thoughts, our fears, our very senses. We arrived at the house just after midnight. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, leaving the world in near total darkness. The outline of the house loomed in front of us, as menacing as ever. The walls seemed to pulse, breathing, alive with something malevolent. The air smelled metallic and damp, heavy with the energy of centuries of fear. Ben gripped my shoulder. "This is it," he whispered. "We either end it tonight, or it ends us." I nodded, though my hands were shaking, my heart hammering. The doll, the same one that had saved Ben, was tucked in my backpack. It had worked once. Somehow, it had to work again. The door was surprisingly easy to open, as if the house was expecting us, inviting us in. The moment we stepped inside, the air changed. Cold, thick, electric. Shadows curled along the walls, moving with intent, whispering our names in voices that were not ours. Mara walked beside us, fragile but alive. Her eyes were wide, still haunted, but determined. I remember the symbols," she said softly. "They respond to intent. If we do it right, we can force it back, maybe for good." We nodded. I could see her fear, but also her courage. She had been through hell, yet she was ready to face it again. The ritual room was as we had left it. Symbols carved into the floor, still glowing faintly, throbbing with a heartbeat of darkness. The shadows within the house seemed to pulse along with it, growing taller, twisting, writhing in anticipation. We stepped into the room carefully. Every step felt like wading through water. The air was heavy, each breath a struggle. We could hear the house whispering, the whispers merging into a low, rhythmic chant, almost hypnotic. I set the doll in the center of the circle, its twisted face catching the candlelight. The shadows shrieked and recoiled slightly. Mara began to chant, her voice trembling at first, then stronger, clearer. The words felt ancient, as old as the house itself. Ben joined her, and soon all three of us were moving in unison, repeating the phrases, focusing on one thought: push the house back, close the hold it had on our lives, banish the darkness. The room shook violently. Floorboards cracked beneath our feet. Candles flared, then went out, leaving us in near total darkness. The shadows surged forward, lashing at us like snakes, but the doll's light pushed against them, a fragile shield. Then we heard it, a sound unlike anything before. The house itself seemed to scream, a low, guttural wail that rattled the walls and the floor. The air felt like knives against our skin. Shadows swirled, forming shapes of those the house had claimed, their faces twisted in anguish, silent mouths opening in eternal screams. I stumbled, nearly falling, but Mara grabbed my arm. "Don't stop! Focus!" she cried. We chanted harder, voices rising over the roar of the house. The symbols glowed brighter, the pulse accelerating like a heartbeat racing to its breaking point. The shadows shrieked and lunged, but we pressed forward, into the circle, into the heart of the house's power. Suddenly, the center of the circle flared with blinding light. The shadows screamed, recoiled, and then silence. When I opened my eyes, the figures were gone. The symbols on the floor no longer pulsed. The air was still, heavy, but calm. The house itself seemed smaller, less alive, as though it had been wounded. Mara collapsed to her knees, exhausted. Ben dropped beside her, breathing heavily. I sank to the floor, trembling. We had done it. Somehow, we had forced the hollow house back, at least for now. But as we looked around, I realized something terrible. The house had changed. The walls, once rotting and twisted, were now pristine, almost too clean. The air smelled faintly sweet, deceptively calm. It was as if the house were waiting, pretending to be harmless, biding its time. I shivered. The doll, still in the center of the circle, had cracked slightly. Its twisted, screaming face now seemed calm, almost smug, as if it knew we had survived, but it hadn't truly won yet. "We have to leave," I whispered. "Before it figures out we weakened it, but didn't destroy it." Mara and Ben nodded, and we made our way to the door. The outside world never looked so bright, so real. The night air hit our faces, crisp and clean, and for the first time in days, we could breathe. But even as we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Shadows clung to the edges of the car, always just beyond clear sight. I could hear faint whispers, almost teasing, almost playful, threading through the silence. "I think it's waiting," Mara said quietly, voice tense. Ben nodded, gripping the wheel tightly. "It's not done. Not with us, not with anyone." I realized then that the hollow house wasn't just a building. It was a force, a predator. It fed on fear, on attention, on life itself. And though we survived, we had made ourselves a part of its story now. The road stretched ahead, dark and empty. We didn't speak, each of us lost in our own thoughts, haunted by what we had seen, by what we had done to survive. And in the back of my mind, I knew this: the hollow house would call again, and next time, it might not allow anyone to leave at all. I glance in the rear-view mirror one last time before the town disappears behind us. The forest stretches dark and endless. I swear I see shapes moving, shadows flickering. But when I blink, there's nothing. For now. The night is quiet, but the fear stays with us forever. We survived, but the hollow house survives too, and I know deep down it will never forget.